You're listening to There Ought to Be a Law, the Center for Auto Safety podcast with Executive Director Michael Brooks, Chief Engineer Fred Perkins, and hosted by me, Anthony Cimino. For over 50 years, the Center for Auto Safety has worked to make cars safer. Hey, listeners. Today is Wednesday, April 15th, 2026. Know
Pay
what
taxes?
Yeah, I guess. Know what's so doing this podcast, you get to listen to your own voice, and you're like, oh God. But no, doesn't sound as good as this podcast. RFK Jr. has a podcast.
That reset the bar, didn't it?
Yeah, so I have an amazing voice. But that's not what the show's about. The show is about safety and auto and wonderful things like that. So I'd like to start off this week with an opinion piece from the New York Times. And no, this is not a nonsense opinion piece, at least in my opinion. My opinion about an opinion piece.
No.
Yeah. No, this is one talking about where did all the affordable cars go? Basically talks about how the auto industry has shifted from having in the late 70s, early 80s, these econo boxes, which sounds kind of derogatory, but they were good cars that got good fuel mileage and were affordable for people. And they've switched it over to, hey, you know what? We can sell less cars, higher profit margins, and make them more dangerous. And that's essentially been their business model. And talks about how there's fewer and fewer cars available at the $20,000 price point. There's few available under $30,000. The average vehicle is over $50,000 now, which is insane. It's worth checking out this article. The one thing that jumped out at me that blew me away was it talks about the Honda Civic that first hit the market in 1973, and it had up to 54 miles per gallon. It got 54 miles per gallon in 1973. That's how are we going backwards? I mean, I get our current cafe standards are, ridiculous now, but what is it supposed to be right now? Is it even 30 miles a gallon?
Average across the fleet, yes. But that doesn't mean every vehicle, obviously.
Sure, it does. But come on, the average from a vehicle from 1973, if that vehicle is getting 54 miles per gallon, it is 2026. Sure, we don't have our flying cars, but there's no reason these vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, before cafe was completely dismantled, we were looking at a average by 2031 of about 50.4 miles per gallon.
Yeah, that's
not happening anymore, though. Well, at least, under the Trump administration, whether we see a return to cafe and the emissions restrictions that we saw prior to this administration remains in question.
Yeah, it's mind blowing to me that we used to have good things. And these were cars that, a Honda Civic from 1973, you could probably easily throw 150,000 miles on it before it would die. Now, I mean, I guess not a lot of cars now, as long as you're not buying American-made vehicles, you can easily get over six figures in terms of mileage, and they'll be fine. But the good luck affording them.
Well, I'm not sure about one of the things you said, which is the cars now are more dangerous. I at the time I owned a Ford Pinto, so that's my reference.
Yeah. Also, you were the one driving it.
I was. Yeah,
well, they've switched to larger SUVs. That's the thing, and people. We know with the rollover issues that they were designed more dangerous, not intentionally.
I guess we'd say they're less safe because there are increased gaps in compatibility in vehicle sizes and weights on the road.
Right. So
might be another way of saying that.
That's another way. That, and also people think I'm in this giant car, I'm protected. Let's text and drive. Whereas
I don't know if the logic goes exactly like that, but you certainly see people who want to buy larger vehicles to protect their family members. That's something I've heard, ad nauseum from friends and neighbors over the years, that, they don't want their child driving around in a tiny fuel economy based vehicle that's an awesome car, the kind of car I would drive, because they're worried, that their kid's going to get in a crash and they're not going to be as protected. And that's something that has, that's not they're not crazy. I mean, that's something I think even the Insurance Institute looked at that and came to the conclusion that, yes, if you are in a larger car, you are, obviously going to be affected less if, you crash into a Honda Civic and you're in a, GM Hummer. Physics, rule in this world, and there's really no getting around that. You in a smaller vehicle, most crashes, the great, or not I wouldn't say the majority, but a very large percentage of crashes are one vehicle crashes. So it's not a matter of compatibility in a lot of situations. But when there are situations where two vehicles are colliding, the big one is going to generally inflict much greater damage on the smaller vehicle.
What do you mean by one car crash? Like it's someone driving into a light
like
pole?
A run off the road.
Oh.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
That's the majority of crashes?
It's not the majority of crashes, but it makes a significant proportion. I want to say 30 to 40%, but readers or listeners, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
People could be reading the transcript instead of listening to this. And if you're reading the transcript, isn't artificial intelligence amazing?
Yeah, for 52% in 2023 were single vehicle crashes. There from IHS. There we go.
That's amazing.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, check out this article. It's pretty, I think it's pretty neat. Pretty well.
I would
done.
look at, and the guy, the solutions proposed here, right? There's one sentence here where the guy proposes basically a system that could work. And his solution is ultimately, we need to allow Chinese vehicles into America and allow them to compete with Detroit. We've been subsidizing Detroit, bailing Detroit out for too long. And there's been numerous policies over the last few decades that have benefited Detroit automakers at the expense of foreign automakers. And, he says, allow Chinese automakers to enter the U.S. market, provided a few things, right? Here's the conditions. They got to make their cars in the United States. Obviously, that can be done. Japanese, German, other manufacturers are doing that. Don't allow their costs to be subsidized by the Chinese government. So you remove, kind of that government subsidization that Detroit is so scared about because they don't think that they can compete with China in that regard. And then 3, which is really important to us and to everyone and to, people who don't even care about vehicle safety, but are more concerned about China becoming a world superpower, make Chinese automakers satisfy security concerns with regard to digital communications. And that would cover, privacy, cybersecurity, and other issues that I think a lot of us have concerns about when it comes to China.
I would totally check out one of these Chinese made vehicles. They're pretty cool looking.
Yeah. And Canada's doing this now, right? They've kind of lost a little faith in the United States as a partner and they've started, they had a 100% tariff on Chinese vehicles, and they're reducing that to 6.1%. So Canadians are going to be driving all these cool little BYD vehicles that, was Jim Farley at Ford was going on and on about. He has a little love affair with the Chinese cars a couple of years ago. Farley is also, in an article notes, that Ford has signaled that it's in preliminary talks with Chinese automakers and looking at joint ventures to actually get some fuel. Fuel economy is one thing, but get vehicles out onto the roads in America that we can afford and that are priced at and under $20,000 versus $50,000 for vehicles with a lot of convenience features that some of us don't care about and don't want.
Michael, could I go to Canada, buy one of these Chinese vehicles, bring it to the U.S., get Virginia plates, and then go 150 miles per hour in D.C.?
You would have to. You can't go 150 miles per hour in DC.
I didn't say I was legal.
Canadian purchase.
Okay.
But you would have to. I think you'd have to apply for some type of exemption to, bring a foreign vehicle in the United States and register it. So, kind of like what Jim Farley did when he brought his Chinese car to America, right?
What did he do? He recalled 100,000 Ford vehicles.
He brought I think it was a BYD vehicle into the United States. And to do so, since the BYD is manufactured for the Chinese market and Chinese safety standards, you have to apply for an exemption from the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards in order to import it into the United States.
Well, Anthony, you're a well-known podcaster. You're wealthy enough to ignore the law, right? That's what all your peers are doing up there in Palm Beach.
Yeah, I just need the last 4 digits of your social security number again. It didn't come through again.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Perfect. That sounds good. So, listeners, if you want to import a Chinese vehicle, go to autosafety.org and click on donate. Then after you donate, I don't know, figure out how to import a Chinese vehicle. We're not going to help.
Yeah, and ultimately, we don't want. I mean, and the author of this article, and I don't know that any of us really want them imported. In that sense, we want them built in America, and so that it's supporting American jobs, right?
Moving on to American jobs, let's talk trucking. 60 Minutes. We got a link to this video. You can see the entire video, or you can read the transcript too. We'll put a link to that. They do this whole piece on trucking fleets that are basically ghost fleets. This was scary as can be. So you can go ahead, and if you're in, was it Slovenia? Is that what they were? Serbia?
It can be. It's all over the place where they're coming from. India as well.
So you can start a trucking company, get into a bunch of problems, and then just quickly reapply and get a different Department of Transportation number. Just change your ID and get out there. And what these trucking companies do, so trucking is regulated, like you only can drive a certain number of hours. And we've discussed this because obviously safety, we don't want people driving more than, I believe it's 11 hours. They're required to have a mandatory break. And so these companies, part of the things they do is they evade that law. So they're forcing drivers to drive even longer, which makes it more dangerous. They're skirting as many laws as possible and just keep changing their
the kind of the center of this, and I think Rob Carpenter, who is I want to say he's some type of consultant in the trucking industry. I believe he's a former Gaslight winner as well for his views on underride guards. But he did a pretty good job explaining this to 60 Minutes of how a carrier can register with the federal government, rack up tons of violations, and then just do a chameleon, do a shapeshifter, and register under a new name and erase all those safety violations and keep going, which is obviously a horrible way to allow trucking companies to operate, any company to operate, frankly. And it's something that has gone on in all sorts of industries involving safety for a while. I mean, I think the first time I heard of such a thing was, I think it was cab drivers in certain cities, creating lots of shell companies to get out from under financial obligations to lawsuits they had been engaged in, that kind of thing. So this is kind of like, it shouldn't be surprising that we're seeing this kind of behavior when it's allowed, because it's something that a lot of corporations do to avoid liability all the time. Kill the corporation, bankrupt it, and then restart it somewhere else without being followed by all of the bad things you did. And it's something that could be, I think, easily corrected by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration by doing their due diligence on who owns and operates these trucking companies.
Yeah, I found it fascinating that you can set up a trucking company in Serbia, never even enter the United States, and run a trucking company in the United States. It's bizarre. Is there other industries where you can do this? Probably.
The internet?
Well, the internet doesn't drive down my street, okay? At least last I checked.
Not yet.
Hey, doesn't this kind of put up the lie to one of the arguments for self-driving heavy trucks, that truck drivers are hard to find? Seems like this scammy company has no trouble finding truck drivers who are well qualified to drive.
Yeah, they've backed down from it. I think it was recently we were looking at another issue in the trucking area. It may have been around autonomous trucks, where the industry is now claiming that it's not that they're having there's not this employment crisis in the trucking industry that they would have you believe, and that's been bad information, that the trucking industry was once supportive of that idea, but now not so much.
With this, okay, so I understand these companies are playing this shell game, but there's a limited number of drivers, and if the driver is working more than 11 hours, sure, the company's at fault, but so is the driver for going beyond this. But then the driver getting into crashes and accidents and whatnot, I imagine they're losing their ability to drive a truck, or no?
I think it's going to completely depend on the state, but yeah, I mean,
Oh.
you're being tracked as a driver as well. I'm not sure how I do know that there are some federal regulations around that as well, but I think, and based on what we've seen with some of the crashes, was it Massachusetts a few years back where they weren't tracking drivers at all, and they had a driver who was on meth and all sorts of other things, who'd had kind of a history that they weren't even after violations, they weren't kicking bad drivers off the road. So that's probably something that the state and federal government could both be doing a much better job on.
So me as a typical driver, I'm driving down the road, I see a big rig. What do I do? Do I Google the company and be like, hey, is this a real company while I'm driving? I mean, what do we do as consumers?
What can you do? I mean, it's kind of like when you every time you pass a Tesla, are you going to worry that they're driving on full self drive and that they could make a mistake, that's the robot can make a mistake that's going to kill you? My experience with truckers is that and I think the stats kind of bear this out, is that they're safer operators of vehicles than most Americans. I don't think that they're it's not like there's some kind of super safety crisis in the trucking industry where they're driving as bad as your average human in a car on the road. But when they do make mistakes, the consequences can be so destructive that we've got to hold them to a higher standard. And so I don't know that it's necessarily some of these problems that they're talking about in this article may be driver problems, but they could also be serious problems with maintenance. If you're operating a trucking company from a foreign country, I've got to think that you're probably not dialing down on the maintenance and safety inspections and all the other things behind the scenes that don't involve the driver. So bad safety records are not just a driver thing. They're in how you maintain, how you load your cargo, how you maintain your vehicles, how what kind of stuff are you hauling, and the problems that individual things can create. There's just so many things to that.
Well, Michael, when I do drive past a Tesla and I look over and I see the driver with that tiny little mustache, I take note and keep going. Get out of the way.
I mean, and we've talked about it, and Fred has advocated for, when a vehicle is operating under autonomy, putting a light on or something. I think we've talked about maybe a blue light. I think Mercedes had a
teal,
turquoise light.
Yeah, turquoise light. Yeah, that notified other drivers as to the vehicle's status, so that people could be prepared for things like short stops and other weird stuff we see with partial autonomy and full autonomy.
Well, speaking of bad driving and Teslas, I'm jumping right into my gaslight. So the Europeans, we look to the Europeans as, hey, they've got sophisticated things. They look healthier than us. They've got healthcare. Look at them talking those foreign languages fluently. It's impressive. Well, up until recently, they did not allow Tesla full self-driving because they're like, we fell for this once before. Let's not do this again. But unfortunately, the Dutch have said, okay, we're going to allow this, but drivers have to pass a quiz first. So Tesla put in something called full self-driving supervised activation tutorial, where they make people sit in their Tesla and go through a little quiz. And the quiz consists of how many questions, Fred? 2. He holds up 2 fingers. He could be insulting me. I'm not sure what the British slang is. And so question 1 is select the
victory.
Yeah. Oh, that was a good movie. Michael Caine and Sylvester Stallone and Pele. Anyway, question 1, select the image where FSD supervised is active. Question 2, are you responsible for safe vehicle operation while FSD supervises active? They're making, first of all, we don't see how many options there are. So this is a multiple guess. This is a multiple guess exam. You're not given any information on how many times you get to fail this and keep going, wrong, and keep doing it over and over again. But this is beyond absurd because we know as soon as people accept something and they think it's real, they're going to forget they took a quiz. They're going to forget all of this and go, oh, my car is driving itself. Ha, windmills, bam, smash into them. This is just liability protection for Tesla. Not even great protection. So they can, roam the Dutch countrysides, and soon other countries of the EU who are dumb enough to fall for this. But they're not you, the French. No, you will not let the little Nazi man and his cars in, will you? No.
That's pretty good. What's it's not much of a quiz, and it's not really a tutorial. It's not, it's not taking you through all the scenario. In fact, here's what I think it should do is take the drivers through a lot of the scenarios where they've seen full self-drive or autopilot fail, and give people a direct tutorial on failure modes might be a better way of doing this. But also I think one of the real failings of this system is that if another person gets in to drive your Tesla and they can they have even less experience with the vehicle than you, they can turn on full self-driving and there is no tutorial for them because you've already taken it for them. So there are problems here. I don't know what the Dutch are completely thinking here, but you know what? They're the first country in Europe to do this, and I guess it's going to be, we're going to see on a country by country basis who over time who allows this to happen, and as time goes on, and as more these level 2+++, whatever you want to call them, vehicles that are semi-autonomous and I guess we're going to see over time what the appetite is for these vehicles in these other countries. But as the industry develops and produces more and more of these, there's going to be more pressure on the authorities to accept these systems and to allow them to deploy.
We're all doomed, and I want to send out a special note to the Dutch that this is awful because my granddaughter is studying in the Netherlands right now. So please be careful of my precious little granddaughter.
Okay.
Well, I mean, she's got to come back to America when that's over, right? So that's
its own set of problems.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh boy, the America haters on this show. All right, it's
terrible.
That's my gaslight. But I'm not sure if it's Tesla. I don't think it's Tesla. I think it's the Dutch. I'm going to give it to the Dutch government. That's right. Take that, big orange. Fred, you have a Musk-related gaslight as well this week, I believe.
I do, and this one's kind of diffuse, but the title of the article is Musk falsely claims Tesla FSD is 10 times safer than humans and complains about lawsuits. Well, okay, that's not a surprise, is it? How can you tell when Musk is lying? Because his lips are moving. So we don't really have a problem with the statement. So where I came at this from the gaslight is that the author, Fred Lambert, editor-in-chief of Electrek, and we'll have this reference on our website, uses as the basis for credible safety claims Waymo. And he says that, because the Tesla didn't do all the good things that Waymo did, then it's really a bad comparison. But I want to bring people back to my perennial problem with Waymo's claims. Quoting from the article, Tesla does not release disengagement data, crash by severity data, miles driven by road type, or the denominator used to calculate its own crash rate. Well, number one, neither does Waymo. Waymo, by contrast, publishes peer-reviewed safety comparisons with matched human driver baselines on the same roads and has been transparent enough that insurers like Swiss Re have run their own analyses on its fleet, close quote. So what about those peer-reviewed safety comparisons? Well, number one, all of the peers were Waymo employees or Waymo clients. It's not exactly an independent review. The comparison of safety is based on the routes, vehicles, and software from before 2022. They look at trailing indicators only, did not identify or show relevance of any leading indicators. And the difference is a trailing indicator tells you what happened. A leading indicator tells you what is likely to happen. And there's no references in the Waymo studies to any leading indicators. And the conclusions that study reached, they're not transferable to or supportive of current vehicles or software or other human-in-the-loop operation architecture, staffing, or connectivity, because it uses completely different vehicles and software, and in fact, software philosophy than the current fleet of vehicles, right? It used to be that they had rules-based self-driving. It used to be that they had Jaguar I-Pace vehicles. All of these vehicles are brand new, top of the line. And the comparison that they used were against the transportation system writ large, which includes vehicles with an average age of 12 years, meaning half of them are older than 12 years. A lot of other conditions based on it. So the basic comparison there that Waymo used is just bullshit. The second point they make is insurers like Swiss Re have run their own analyses. Well, number one, Waymo paid for that analysis. The analysis ignored all the collisions and other events reported to NHTSA per the standard general order. They compared crash data against only those that had insurance claims. So if Waymo paid off somebody rather than put it through insurance, it wouldn't be relevant, would not fall into the base. It did not include any determination of fault. Fault is a legal dictum. It's not an engineering consideration. So putting in a determination of at fault really skews the data in ways that are not understood very well. Again, data is based on only operations from 2022 or earlier in restricted speed zones and with a different software stack. The current Waymo operations are still not really autonomous. It's really human in the loop operation with end-to-end AI. So this is something completely new in the world, and nobody really knows how this is going to work out. It's only been in place for a year or so, and by Waymo saying that what we did in the past before 2022 is applicable to the safety of the current vehicles that are now operating with end-to-end AI with human in the loop, baffles me how they can say that this is relevant to the current safety estimates they're making. Again, they compared all the vehicles, 12 years or so, with an average age of 12 years with brand new premium Waymo vehicles, which include built-in safety devices not evident in the older vehicles they're comparing to, notably automatic braking and collision avoidance, none of which are in the really old cars that are in the database. So my problem with this is not that it says Musk is a liar and that the safety claims are incredible. It's just that Mr. Lambert assumes that the nonsense being put out by Waymo, propagated by Alphabet in its Google search engine, is somehow a gold standard for what safety analysis in the AV industry should be like. So that's it. That's it. End of rant.
That's a good take because, Fred Lambert's generally pretty good, but that was, he slipped that in there in that article, but you didn't let him get away with it. But I'd like to point out that our esteemed senator from the state of Texas, Ted Cancun Cruz, he, is just a simple boy, educated at Princeton, law degree from Harvard. He recently, in a Senate hearing, said, hey, Waymos don't drive drunk. They don't drive distracted. They don't text. So what I'm trying to say, listeners, is you can have the best education in the world, but eventually you'll just be reading press releases from Waymo because that's how good Waymo's PR is. There we go. Michael, got a gaslight?
No.
What?
I've got an anti-gaslight.
What?
So
I don't know how to score this.
We're so focused on all the bad in the world, right, guys? I wanted to focus on something good, and this one is, one of our. I'm sure Jonathan Morrison at this point has gotten a gaslight from us, a few months into his job over at NHTSA. But
he got a gaslight before he even started at NHTSA.
That probably did. But in this case, NHTSA's doing something really great, and I saw Jonathan's name pop up in this article. What they're doing is putting a lot of money and grants. NHTSA is given a grant of are awarding $50 million in grants for ambulance services across the country to start or expand pre-hospital blood programs. Now, what is this? This is what, allows an ambulance to bring blood to a crash scene where there are people rapidly losing blood and potentially, dying on the scene. And to start blood transfusions way before they get to the hospital, it's something that was developed primarily in, I think, combat zones to treat soldiers who were injured, way out in the middle of nowhere where medical care is a long way away, somewhat analogous to your situation in a lot of crashes where, you could be half an hour or more even from a hospital, losing blood fast and needing a transfusion, giving you an idea of NHTSA's kind of budget priorities here. NHTSA's $50 million is a lot of money over at NHTSA. That's, I think the NCAP budget now is around $6.5 million. So NHTSA's awarding, 8 times that amount to ambulance services across the country to get this program in place. And I think we might see dramatic impacts from this and some of the more deadly crashes. I think we could see a reduction in fatalities from this type of program. And for that, I'm giving out our first anti-gas light.
Wow. That's a good one. I like this one a lot. The article, which we linked to, talks about how previously ambulances, EMTs would have saline on the vehicle and they could pump that in, but sometimes that's just not enough. It's not going to make it. But now they're talking about, hey, we can put blood infusion right here, type O blood, which everyone's a donor receiver. I don't know. And that will basically revive people and get them back alive in a fighting chance. It's amazing. Yeah, it's a good one. Was anyone a type O blood donor?
Not me.
No.
I'm a B+.
I have to ask my mom every couple of years what my blood type is because I continually forget.
Why do you need to know what your blood type is?
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm stupid for not remembering it, but for whatever reason, it goes in one ear and right out the other, and I forget it. And so, I'll ask my mom next time I see her what it is and forget it again.
Okay. Listen, this is a tough one to score, honestly, this week. I mean, my gaslight ended with Michael saying that was pretty good. I mean, that's bonus points right there. Fred here got the hidden little angle of that Waymo, a little toss off to Waymo was hidden this article about Musk being a jackass.
Yeah, he squeaked his way to Waymo through Musk.
Yeah, that was some next level ninja type moves. And then Michael, you do the anti-gaslight. I
think I'd give it to Michael. Some good news from time to time is always welcome on the show.
Well, for trying to think you can judge Fred, you just lost. Okay, yeah. There you go. But I'm going to pull the Phil Koopman rule, and I think everybody's a winner this week.
I got the T-shirt.
Everybody's a winner. That was a good one. I like a nice positive story. One thing they point out that this will have to keep funding this program because blood expires. Oh, because they'll have to keep getting it.
And I believe there's a blood shortage going on right now too. Yeah, so that's everybody get out there and donate blood if you're capable.
Right. I've done it once. It's a good time. I got cookies. Anything for a cookie. Let's jump back over to our friends in Europe. And the Europeans, they have their version of NCAP, which is the new car assessment program. And from an article in cbtnews.com, which we get all your cannabis tobacco news from. I'm not really sure what that stands for. I'm going to quote from this article. European safety officials say political dynamics in the United States are slowing the pace of vehicle safety advancements, raising concerns about the country's ability to keep up with global standards. And to that, I say, screw you, Europe. You don't know nothing. Okay? We're pulling out of NATO now. Gonna insult us? No, they basically point out saying, yeah, we have to completely go our own. I mean, Euro NCAP standard's been stronger than the US for quite some time at this point. And they're basically saying we can't even look at what the US is doing to base things off of, just because every few years you guys just switch and go the other direction. It's just a distraction. That was my takeaway.
Well, the article, I mean, there's some things here that aren't completely accurate. I mean, they say in the article that, the The regulatory structure governing the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration requires key decisions to pass through Congress, creating delays and limiting the agency's flexibility. That's not really correct. Most of what goes through Congress regarding, there are two important things that go through Congress. One of them you could say does delay the agency, and that is the budget. Appropriations, NHTSA not getting enough money. Yes, that creates delays. Yes, that limits the agency's flexibility to update safety protocols. But the agency's decision-making in regards to rulemakings and in regards to safety does not hinge on congressional approval. The agency has the authority to prop up rules and regulations that benefit motor vehicle safety broadly. As long as they can prove that there's a benefit to motor vehicle safety, they can put a rule in place. So that's not really the case. Congress isn't standing in the way on individual NHTSA actions and rules and regulations, although I would argue that they are standing in the way on getting NHTSA the money they need to properly create those rules, do the research, and do everything the agency needs to do to make America's roads safer. But nonetheless, the article's point remains, NCAP in the United States is so far behind Europe at this point that I'm concerned it may never catch up. We even see, bills moving through the House specifically right now, which would allow automakers to submit their own, voluntarily submit testing results for vehicles, which is absolutely the opposite of what NCAP was designed to be. And in fact, NCAP was designed to be independent. It was designed to be the fast way for NHTSA to start doing research and start, taking a look at testing and things that they could do to make the fleet safer without having the constraints that are imposed on rulemaking and the other processes that are far less flexible. So there's a lot of problems here. I think the number one issue, I think, for NCAP is that its budget has been slashed even over the last decade. They just don't have the money there to conduct the type of testing that they need to be able to conduct to ensure safety on the roads and to expand that testing over time to accommodate for newer designs, new software, crash avoidance features, partial autonomy. There's so many issues that are coming down the road that the NCAP needs to get started on, but it's at the same time still hasn't caught up to a lot of the issues that have been plaguing safety for the past few years. So NCAP needs reform. It needs an overhaul. But, in my opinion, the number one thing that can be done there right now is to give the NCAP program more money to carry out its mission. I think I've mentioned in previous podcasts that the budget NCAP has right now makes it hard for them even to buy the cars they need to test, much less improve their programs, put in new tests, and do the type of research they need to succeed at all that.
Excellent. Now I'm going to take a left turn and go to our friends from the Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. They did a public poll recently, and I'm going to quote a little bit from it. The poll found that 81% of respondents are concerned about sharing the road with driverless cars, including 42% were very concerned. Trepidation is even higher for driverless tractor trailer and delivery trucks. And the public also strongly backs federal safeguards. The poll found 76% support requiring a driverless car vision test. Now, that was my big takeaway. Now, I get most people are like, I don't want to be, there's an automatic car, an AV, I don't want to be on the road with it. I don't want to be on the road with a Tesla. I don't want to be near a BMW driver. I think BMW driver is a little more scary to me than a Waymo, but that's a different story. But what I really liked is here, and I didn't see the poll. Maybe, Michael, you can elucidate it. But the poll found 76% support requiring a driverless car vision test. And now, Fred's been talking about this since podcast episode number 3. I'm not sure if it was the 3rd episode. It might have been the 1st episode.
It was the 2nd.
It was the 2nd episode. There we go. So I love this idea, but Michael, what is this? What was the question asked? And what does this look like? Can we actually put in there? Can we actually give Fred a job where he holds up like a giant letter E in front of an AV and have it say, yes, I see it's the letter E?
hopefully the test is going to be a little more complicated than that, right? Otherwise, it just like with NCAP, manufacturers design the vehicles just to recognize the letter E. And get away with the test. But this is something I think the most important part about this poll to me is that it found that Americans want the government involved in setting safety standards to make sure these vehicles are operating capably and safely. The responses are overwhelming, and if you go down the list, the poll looked at basically three main categories: autonomous vehicles, advanced safety technology, automatic emergency braking, speed prevention technology, that kind of thing, and then truck safety. And what you'll see here is that the public is not only concerned, but they also really want the government taking positions and doing their part to advocate for safety, which is an area where we think the government is failing in a number of areas right now. Definitely around autonomous vehicles, where the federal government and some states seem more concerned with, propping up, the fortunes of billionaires in order to get something on our roads that we're not all really sure we want or need, or we're not really sure what the negative impacts will be, even beyond safety. It looks like, a lot of the negative impacts, there may be safety impacts, and there probably will be, but beyond that, the impact of having extra congestion and all the other issues that we've seen around AVs could be very, put people off more than the rare safety circumstance, right? I mean, if you're driving around every day and you're seeing AVs stopped in the road or causing traffic, or you're seeing empty AVs running around everywhere that are causing traffic, that's going to piss you off a lot more than hearing about a crash that happened in a state across the country that involved someone's safety. So, there's, I think overwhelmingly, the poll found that Americans want the government to get involved here and set standards. And I think the vision test is a great example of one of those standards that the public wants, because, we've got to make sure that these vehicles are capable of recognizing every single one of us out on the road, whether we're in a car or outside of a car, and so that a robot's not running over us, right? So that's number one. But also, the poll went further and found that there's a lot of support to require companies to report crash information to the DOT, right? That's obviously something that needs to be tracked if we're going to advocate and ultimately get rules in place that can help out with the safety of these vehicles. There was also some input on remote drivers, following up on Senator Markey's report and some of that stuff. And there's a lot of support for making the current rules better, right? Making AEB, which the automatic emergency braking rule that came out and is still being challenged by the industry, is not good enough, right? It's still not geared to recognize bicyclists, motorcyclists, and all sorts of other conveyances that people are riding around on. And the industry is opposing strengthening that rule at the same time as they're claiming that they can build these autonomous vehicles that presumably can recognize bicyclists and motorcyclists and all these other people and stop on the road. So there's a big gap there in what the industry is saying and doing. And so I think this poll is really interesting and something that's worth checking out. If anything, just to get an idea of how the public feels about the issue, and how, the bigwigs in Washington are ignoring the public in favor of promoting corporate growth and wealth.
Or anybody who's interested in issues that they could address, we have a checklist for AV safety for regulators that's on our website, and give you some ideas of the scope of considerations that might be included in regulations.
And before we move on, I just want to jump in there. Michael, you're talking about the negative aspects we see with AVs, but the positive ones, those are just theoretical, honestly, at this point.
I'm still waiting to see those for most part. I mean, I can see where there could be
theoretically.
So I could see where there could be some. I mean, there are some. I think some of the arguments from the disabled community, are valid. And
Potentially.
some of the eventually, and
No,
if the industry
potentially, I said
actually,
that.
if the industry actually focuses on that, right? I'm still not convinced that the autonomous vehicle industry isn't just using the disabled as kind of an emotional crutch to get them to help them out in their lobbying. And then when they finally do deploy these vehicles and they find out that, oh, it's really expensive to put a wheelchair equipment into these vehicles, or it's really equipment to do this A and B, then are they really going to do it? I don't think so, but we will see.
Crazy. With that, hey, Fred, you got some towel for us?
I do. This is on the death of critical thinking and automated gullibility.
Oh, is this about me?
Yeah,
could be. Could
Okay.
be. We'll find out as we go through this. So I'm thinking about Chat GPT and its ilk that substitute trailing indicators from published information for forward-looking critical thinking and innovation. And when I think of it, I really think that AI is just the opposite of human intelligence. It's not a substitute, because human intelligence starts with a specific observation and then generalizes to its potential applications. AI instead generalizes from the information that it sees in databases and then attempts to apply whatever conclusions it's reached from the generalizations to the specific instance that it's currently addressing. So, for example, when Einstein discovered that E equals mc squared, he did not anticipate Hiroshima. That was an application that came out of people's use of that specific equation to generalize into the world of atomic energy and atomic weapons. But when AI states that AVs are X times safer than human drivers, it does not apply to the safety of the specific Waymo that's taking you to the airport today. Accepting the safety of that ride is an example of automated gullibility. And that's a great example of automated gullibility by the ubiquitous statements about automated vehicle safety on the highways that you can get from your computer. AI-enhanced searches will highlight erroneous references to driverless miles, as discussed earlier, without a human death at fault of the AV. But those results are based on numerous publications by Waymo, which is, by the way, owned by the same company that owns Google, which means that it's an expert in propagating misinformation. The results are based on numerous publications by Waymo, uncritical consumers of the propaganda, and by reporters who regurgitate Waymo's nonsense, thus reinforcing the myth, all mediated by Alphabet and its ubiquitous Google search engine. But ubiquity is not proof. It's only proof that the urban myth propagation has worked. Unfortunately, reporters, for example, will hang on every word that slides out of President Trump's mouth without emphasizing to its readers that you can tell when he's lying because his lips are moving. That's the derivative report they publish, and you read and you accept is really an example of automated gullibility. It just shows up in front of you and you absorb it. There's a word for that, anoesis, which means the uncritical absorption of data through pure sensation. I can only add my small voice to everyone's high school history teacher's warning to be skeptical, to look under the covers and assure yourself that the information you've heard and may be tempted to repeat is true and not just truthiness. Humans throughout history have been encouraged to be gullible by their rulers. It's really troubling that the business of gullibility has now been automated and is controlled by a very small group of unimaginably wealthy and conservative oligarchs who, in the context of AVs, are using that gullibility to destroy local economies and the lives of the people in the communities who depend on providing real human value to their transportation ecosystems. End of rant. There you have it.
I want to thank you because some weeks it's a struggle to come up with a title for this episode, but I think you got it there with automated gullibility.
I thought it was going to be Anoesis or, E equals MC squared.
Yeah, Anoesis. Good luck with that translation software. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Automated gullibility. Listeners, go to autosafety.org, click on donate. You're not automated or gullible. You're just a good person. You're a good person. Go to autosafety.org, click on donate. You're a good person. You know why I know you're a good person? Because unlike me, you probably have a fire extinguisher in your car. That's right. Before we jump into recalls, this is a good little article about you should have a fire extinguisher in your car. Now, I have a fire extinguisher in my kitchen. It's under the sink. I could get to it in a struggle. But I don't have a fire extinguisher in my car, unlike Mr. Brooks, who thinks he's better than me.
Well, I mean, it's not because I have a fire extinguisher in my car that I think that, but it's just, it's a fire extinguisher in a car, obviously, I'll repeat this again and again, but vehicle fires are somewhat rare. I mean, the odds of you being in one are not exceedingly high. The odds of you coming across one are even a minor fire in a small collision, a fire extinguisher could do a lot to protect, your vehicle. I mean, it might be the difference between having a crispy vehicle after a minor collision or being able to put out something that caught fire quickly and having minimal damage that you can have repaired. But beyond that, if you come upon a situation where there's someone, in a vehicle that could be trapped, and you have the ability to put out that fire. I mean, I kind of think these things in this way, and I think a similar way about, Narcan. I don't ingest any opiate related drugs, but I do have a little pack of Narcan in case I come across someone who might be in that situation. And it's more a matter of guilt for me. Like if I come upon the scene knowing that I could have been prepared, but I didn't, I don't think I'd feel really good about myself. So I guess the carrying the fire extinguisher with me, carrying a fire extinguisher with me in the car makes me feel like I'm prepared for an eventuality that if it does occur, I'm ready and, hopefully can help someone or possibly help myself or put out a fire in my own car. But at the same time, it allows me to not feel like I could have done something and failed at a later point. So fire extinguishers aren't super expensive. If you can afford one, get one of the, the good old regular fire extinguisher was the one that was recommended in this article. Basically the ABC, and you can get a compact fire extinguisher. You can get a larger one. Mine is, somewhat medium size. I'd say about, probably a 5 to 10 pound one.
Where do I put it?
They're great to have. I keep mine in my trunk, and most fire extinguishers you purchase, I think, will come with some type of kit where you could strap the fire extinguisher down. Believe me, you'll want to, because it will roll around all day long if you don't fix it somewhere. But I would recommend having a fire extinguisher to everyone if that's, if it's within your budget. Not everyone can afford just, $50 to $100 items here and there just to buy for the off chance that they might see a vehicle fire occurring. But having an extra fire extinguisher around if you have a house fire and you just have to run out to your car and grab it is also a good thing. So I think that it's a good idea.
Okay, well, you heard it here first. When you're at the Piggly Wiggly picking up your Narcan and your EpiPens, make sure to grab a fire extinguisher.
EpiPens are another good thing.
Yeah, EpiPens super expensive
though. Without a prescription either, so
and they're also
that makes that more difficult.
They're also like $1,000.
Benadryl, however, keep Benadryl with you. Yeah, they weren't they?
There's a patent on
Martin
it.
Shkreli, or was it one of those pharma bros that tried to boost the price of EpiPens back in the day?
The drug itself is dirt cheap. It's the injector that they have a patent on that is very expensive.
That's absurd.
It is. But with that, let's jump into recalls. And the first one up we have is from Hyundai, 294,128 vehicles. The 2023 to 2026 Genesis G90, same year as the Hyundai Ioniq 6. Oh, I like the Ioniq 6. The 2024 to 2026 Santa Fe Hybrid, and same year as the regular Santa Fe. The front seat belts in the subject vehicles may not be sufficiently attached to the seat frame due to a damaged snap-on anchor. And I feel like we've come across this before with Hyundai specifically. If not, we've come across this recently with people with their seatbelt anchors not being here. Or am I just having lame dreams again? And I'm dreaming about this.
I mean, if I had to pin it down, I think there was something involving Rivian vehicles and seatbelt anchors, but there have been a few lately that have involved either the seatbelt buckle not properly latching, the seat back not properly working with the. I mean, you know, I don't think I've seen one exactly like this from Hyundai. But essentially, they're gonna put a reinforcement clip onto the vehicles. I mean, obviously, this is a huge safety problem. If your seatbelt isn't secured to the seat, it's not going to function properly and keep you restrained in a collision. And so they've come up with some type of retaining clip that's going to fix this issue. They've already put this into their manufacturing process, but it looks like it's going to be June before they're going to be able to get the remedies out to owners via recall. So you've got a couple of months there where if you're driving one of these vehicles, you know, I would certainly be concerned that I'm driving around with a vehicle with a bad seatbelt. So, you know, I think it might even be worth, you know, if this was me, I might even want to go visit my dealer and have them take an early inspection if they're willing to.
Great. Next up, Mercedes-Benz 24,092 vehicles. Oh, Fred, your vehicle's in here. The 2018 to 2020 Maybach S560 4MATIC. Same years, just not the Maybach version. A whole bunch of other dumb name Mercedes vehicles, the 450 Matics, 4MATICs, and the coupes, the wagons, the cabriolets, the sedans, pages and pages of silly names. Let's see. The due to a loss of lubricant at the universal joint, which in the further course of operation could lead to the fracture of the universal joint. As a result, the connection between the transfer case and the front axle transmission would no longer be assured, and a loss of propulsion without warning cannot be ruled out. As a result, the risk of crash would increase. Huh? What?
Now you're basically losing your drive shaft's ability to work. You're going to lose propulsion, and you know, essentially you're stalled in the middle of the road, or you know, you lose propulsion while you're engaged in some type of maneuver that, you know, timing is important. Crossing a 4-lane highway or something like that, where you need to get across, your drivetrain fails, and you're stuck and you're a target. So this is essentially, I think they're going to, you're going to go into the Mercedes dealer. They're going to check your drive shaft, see if it's damaged, see if it's got this defect, because not all of them have it. And then they will change the drive shaft, replace it if they find this condition. And it looks like that's going to be starting up in early June.
Fred, for 1,000 points, name the American TV show that featured the fictional rock band named Drive Shaft.
Ooh.
I lose.
It was on ABC. Michael, use your background as a hint. Michael's background is a beach scene.
Oh, let's see.
Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom.
I don't know. Three's Company.
Lost.
That's all you're going to get.
The answer was Lost. That's right.
Oh, well.
All right. Final recall. Volkswagen, 6,077 vehicles. The 2026 Audi Q3. Let's see. The target data container for the sunroof control unit was programmed incorrectly. As a result, the sunroof closing function may not comply with FMVSS number 118, power operated window, partition, and roof parallel systems. So what happens? Does this start closing on my hand if I have my hand in the way?
It's not even that. It looks like the problem is that they're allowing remote closure of the sunroof, which means that, and I'm assuming that it doesn't have an auto reverse function, which FMVSS 118 requires in certain circumstances. So the theory is here, you could be, this is really bad parenting, but you could be in a grocery store parking lot. You left your kids in the car. Yeah, you could be at Piggly Wiggly and you left your kids in the car, which you shouldn't do, but, which is something that I think a lot of us experienced in the 70s before we were smarter. And the kids could be playing out of the up in the playing. If I've got an open sunroof and I'm stuck in a hot car, where am I going to be? Out the sunroof, probably yelling things at other patrons at the grocery store and acting like a kid. You could actuate that remotely without even being near the vehicle, without even being able to check to see if anyone is inside of the frame of the sunroof, and without an auto reverse function, then you could see some serious injuries or death associated with it. And so essentially FMVSS 118 wants to make sure that in situations where you don't have that function, that I think it's the remote operation here that's the problem, because there's not a driver or an operator there to check for a human or other obstruction in the sunroof.
Well, listeners, just like FMVSS 118, we care about your safety. And with that, we'll be back next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening.
Michael, this is where you say goodbye.
I'm just thinking about, leaving and going to the post office to pay my taxes.
Stop thinking, start addressing the issue.
Yeah, start yelling at patrons in the parking lot. All right, I'm clicking stop.
For more information, visit www.autosafety.org.